Welcome to Walking the Haftarah. I'm Tyler Merwin, and this is Torah portion, SHELACH LEKHA. This week's portion is Numbers 13:1 through 15:41, and our Haftarah this week is Joshua chapter 2, 1 through 24. SHELACH LEKHA means send for yourself. As the opening line of our portion, it reads, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh spoke to Moses, saying, Send men, or send for yourself men, to spy out the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the people of Israel. From each tribe of their families you shall send a man, every one a chief among them. Numbers 13, 1 and 2. This week we continue in the book of Numbers. In our portion this week will cover the spies that are sent into the Promised Land, the evil report, the punishment of 40 years in the wilderness, the failed second attempt, and of course, ZC. Our Haftarah this week will cover the spies that were sent from Joshua to spy out Jericho, which is, of course, the thematic connection to our portion. So let's begin with a review of this week's portion. Our portion is titled Shelach, which means send or to send, or more literally, Shelach Lekha, which means send for yourself. This makes more sense when we see the same event recorded in Deuteronomy. Then all of you came near to me and said, Let us send men before us, that they may explore the land for us and bring us word again of the way by which we must go up and the cities into which we shall come. The thing seemed good to me, and I took 12 men from you, one man from each tribe. Deuteronomy 1, 22 and 23. When we just read this story in the book of Numbers, it seems like it was Adonai's plan to actually send the spies. But instead, when we read Deuteronomy, we see that Adonai was actually agreeing with the people's plan to send the spies in. It was decided to send 12 spies, one representative from each tribe. Of the 12 men, only 2 remained steadfast in their faith to Adonai, unfortunately. Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, from the tribe of Judah, and Hoshea, the son of Nun, from the tribe of Ephraim. These were the names of the men whom Moses sent to spy out the land. And Moses called Hoshea, the son of Nun, Joshua. Numbers 1:16. So Moses puts a blessing on Hoshea, now Joshua, and actually adds the Hebrew letter Yod to the beginning of his name, turning his name from Hoshea to Joshua or Yehoshua. Hoshea means salvation in Hebrew, and by adding the Vav, of course it makes it Yehoshua, which means Yah is salvation or Yah saves. We see clearly from the Deuteronomy passage that the purpose was supposed to be for a military reconnaissance exercise. Things like planning the most efficient routes to take when coming into the land. But while doing that, Moses also asked them to actually focus on some key items, like what kind of people dwell there, how fortified are their dwellings, how good is the land, and was the tree in the land. The Hebrew text actually does have the singular form of tree in the text instead of the plural form that we usually find in our translations. So Moses asked them is to search for the tree. Of course, generally it's just meant to be looking for fruit trees as the plural form would imply. But the use of the singular is actually referring to the tree of life and the Garden of Eden. So Moses is actually looking into the promised land with spiritual eyes. And lastly, we are in the harvest season, and Moses requests that they bring back some of the fruit of the land. The spies head out on their mission and are gone for 40 days, a number for testing, and they are, in fact, tested in the land. The spies return from their test, and they told him, We came to the land which you sent us. It flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. However, the people who dwell in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. And besides, we saw the descendants of Anak there. Numbers 13, 27 and 28. They began with a good report, but failed to see the land with spiritual eyes, the eyes of faith. They instead focused on the physical obstacles instead and on the strength of their adversaries. The people cried out because of the evil report and actually started talking about returning to Egypt. Caleb and Joshua try to stand up and to bring the people back into seeing that the obstacles don't matter because Adonai will be the one fighting on their behalf, and there's no obstacle that he can't overcome. But the people rise up against him, and they're actually ready to stone them when the physical presence of Adonai appears at the tent of meeting. Adonai tells Moses he will strike down these people and start over again with Moses. Moses intercedes again on behalf of the people, making an argument that doing so would actually harm Adonai's name, which is actually his reputation, reminding him also of his great and compassion and mercy. Then Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh said, I have pardoned according to your word. But truly, as I live, and as all the earth shall be filled with the glory of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, none of the men who have seen my glory and my signs that I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and yet have put me to the test these 10 times, and have not obeyed my voice, shall see the land that I swore to give to their fathers. None of those who despised me shall see it. Numbers 14, 20 through 23. The decree goes on to detail that all whom were counted in the census, those 20 years and above, would not enter the promised land, but their children, in fact, would. Only Caleb and Joshua would enter from this generation because they had a different spirit, the spirit of faith in Adonai. The decree is for 40 years, 1 year for each day that the spies were in the land, which would be actually calculated from the Exodus from Egypt. The 10 spies who brought the evil report actually die in a plague that immediately follows. The next day, after the punishment decree was rendered, the people declare that they will now go in and fight for the land. Moses warned them not to go because Adonai would not be with them. The decree had already been made. But they went anyway and got their tails kicked. Next we get to chapter 15, and that continues to teach us some of the commandments that will come into effect when they actually enter the land. Again, the placement, the smichut of this text, is actually showing the people that they will, in fact, inherit the land, even though they had this devastating blow of being punished and dying in the wilderness. Their children would, in fact, go in. We begin with the libation offering that was to accompany all the other offerings. And then we get a great reminder. And if a stranger is sojourning with you, or anyone is living permanently among you, and he wishes to offer a food offering with a pleasing aroma to Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, he shall do as you do. For the assembly there shall be one statute for you, and for the stranger who sojourns with you, a statute forever throughout your generations. You and the sojourner shall be alike before Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. One law and one rule shall be for you and for the stranger who sojourns with you. Numbers 14, 14 through 16. There are only one set of rules for those who are considered Israel, both the natural branch and those who are grafted in. Next we cover unintentional sins for both the congregation and the individual. The congregation's unintentional sin could be that leadership ruling erroneously on an issue, or the majority of the community committing an actual violation, but unintentionally. So if this violation was unintentional and it didn't fit the two categories I just explained, then it would be considered an individual violation and would have been handled as the text says about the individual unintentional sin. But if the violation was intentional, but the person who does anything with a high hand, whether he is native or a sojourner, reviles Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, and that person shall be cut off from among his people, because he has despised the word of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh and has broken his commandment. That person shall be utterly cut off. His iniquity shall be on him. Numbers 15, 30 and 31. This is rebellion. They know the law, but they just don't care. This is not someone who has a weak moment or let their flesh get the best of them. Now, directly after this, we get an example of someone committing a high-handed sin, the ordeal of the Sabbath breaker. The Torah states that he was gathering wood on the Shabbat, which isn't very clear exactly what he was doing. But whatever it was obvious enough to be noticed by witnesses who then brought them to Moses and Aaron for judgment. Adonai, who knows all, and mostly who knows our heart and our motivation, judged this to be a capital violation of the Shabbat, which brings about the death penalty, which was carried out. The portion ends with the commandment of the tzitzit. This is usually translated as tassels or fringes in our English Bibles. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh said to Moses, "Speak to the people of Israel and tell them to make tassels on the corners of their garments throughout their generations, and to put a cord of blue on the tassel of each corner. It shall be a tassel for you to look at and remember all the commandments of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh and to do them, not to follow after your own heart and your own eyes, which you are inclined to whore after. So you shall remember to do all my commandments, and be holy to your God. I am Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, your God." Numbers 15, 37 through 41. As our beloved teacher, Brad Scott, taught us, the tzitzit is likened to a wedding ring. When we look upon or feel the wedding band on our finger, it should remind us of our spouse and the covenant that we made with them. Likewise, the tzitzit are to remind us on a regular basis that we are in covenant with the Almighty and are to remember to keep His commandments. And this brings us to our Haftarah this week in the book of Joshua, Joshua 2, 1 through 24. To set the scene, we are 39 years from our Torah portion, the original failure of spying out the land. Joshua is now leading Israel, and they are about to enter the Promised Land after that decreed 40 years in the wilderness was completed. And Joshua, the son of Nun, sent 2 men secretly from Shittim as spies, saying, "Go, view the land, especially Jericho." And they went and came into the house of a prostitute whose name was Rahab, and lodged there. Joshua 2:1. To start with, Joshua decided to send 2 spies, not 12. He had been a part of that original 12 spies and painfully remembered that tragic outcome. Caleb and Joshua were the 2 that had a different spirit in the first spying campaign. We often say at our community to be the 2 and not the 10, and that's sound advice. Joshua sends 2 who are faithful and trustworthy, though their identities are not given in our text. But the sages believe them to be Caleb, again, and Pinchas, who both had proven their faith and loyalty to Adonai. They enter Jericho and enter the house of Rahab, who is described as a prostitute in our translation. Rashi and some other sages render the Hebrew as innkeeper instead of prostitute. Dr. Holisa Aylwine has done an in-depth study along with this and other controversial characters in her Creation Gospel Workbook 4, The Scarlet Harlot and the Crimson Thread. If you want a deeper dive, a much deeper dive, I suggest you pick that up. And it was told to the king of Jericho, "Behold, men of Israel have come here tonight to search out the land." And the king of Jericho sent to Rahab, saying, "Bring out the men who have come to you, who entered your house, for they have come to search out the land." But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them. And she said, "True, the men came to me, but I did not know where they were from. And when the gate was about to be closed at dark, the men went out. I do not know where the men went. Pursue them quickly, for you will overtake them." But she had brought them up to the roof and hid them with the stalks of flax that she had laid in order on the roof. So the men pursued after them on the way to the Jordan as far as the fords. And the gate was shut as soon as the pursuers had gone out. Verses 2 through 7. Whether innkeeper, prostitute, or both, Rahab's house or business would have been a natural place that strangers would have frequented. The king had apparently been alerted to the Israeli spies and got a report that they had visited Rahab's establishment. Rahab hid the spies and sent the king's forces on a wild goose chase. Before the men lay down, she came up on the roof and said to them, "I know that Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh has given you the land, and that the fear of you has fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land melt away before you. For we have heard how Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the two kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon and Og, whom you devoted to destruction. And as soon as we heard it, our hearts melted, and there was no spirit left in any man because of you. For Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, your God, He is God in the heavens above and on the earth beneath." Verses 8 through 11. After the king's forces had left the city, Rahab shows the spies her reverence for Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, calling him by name. She recalls the events of the Red Sea 40 years earlier, and more recently the utter defeat of Sihon and Og. She proclaims that Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is God of heaven above and earth beneath. What an awesome proclamation of faith for someone who had only heard of the awesome deeds of our Elohim. "Now then, please swear to me by Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh that as I have dealt kindly with you, you also will deal kindly with my father's house, and give me a sure sign that you will save alive my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and deliver our lives from death." And the men said to her, "Our life for yours, even to death, if you do not tell this business of ours. Then when Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh gives us the land, we will deal kindly and faithfully with you." Verses 12 through 14. Rahab had already saved the spies' lives, so saving hers would actually not be considered a kindness, but an actual obligation. The kindness aspect would be the act of extending that protection to her whole family. The spies swear by their own lives to protect Rahab and her family if she keeps the secret. Then she let them down by a rope through the window, for her house was built into the city wall, so that she lived in the wall. And she said to them, "Go into the hills, or the pursuers will encounter you, and hide there 3 days until the pursuers have returned. Then afterward you may go your way." Verses 15 and 16. Rahab's house was built into the wall with a window to the outside. It was at least on the second floor or higher, or they wouldn't have had to use a rope to get down. Pastor Mark highlights a point about where she lived. We often remember from the Bible stories we were told as kids that the walls of Jericho fell down. But the actual text says that the wall, singular, of Jericho fell. This makes sense because if they all fell down, Rahab's home would have been demolished in the falling. Also, if all the walls fell down, the inhabitants inside could have fled in multiple directions. But if one wall fell, the invading army could go through that breach and everyone inside would be trapped, fish in a barrel. Rahab then gives them sound advice on what to do as soon as they are out of the city, and they follow her advice. The men said to her, "We will be guiltless with respect to this oath of yours that you have made us swear. Behold, when we come into the land, you shall tie this scarlet cord in the window through which you let us down, and you shall gather into your house your father and your mother, your brothers and your father's household. Then if anyone goes out of the doors of your house into the street, his blood shall be on his own head, and we shall be guiltless. But if a hand is laid on anyone who is with you in the house, his blood shall be on our head. But if you tell this business of ours, then we shall be guiltless with respect to your oath that you have made us swear." And she said, "According to your words, so be it." Then she sent them away, and they departed, and she tied the scarlet cord in the window. Verses 17 through 21. The details of the agreement are clarified, and the spies are let out of Jericho. They departed and went into the hills and remained there 3 days until the pursuers returned. And the pursuers searched all along the way and found nothing. Then the 2 men returned. They came down from the hills and passed over and came to Joshua the son of Nun. And they told him all that had happened to them. And they said to Joshua, "Truly, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh has given all the land into our hands, and also all the inhabitants of the land melt away because of us." Verses 22 through 24. This fulfills a prophecy that Moses spoke after the Red Sea crossing in the Song of the Sea. Now are the chiefs of Edom dismayed. Trembling seizes the leaders of Moab. All the inhabitants of Canaan have melted away. Exodus 15:15. Our God is righteous, awesome, and true. What he has declared, he will accomplish. Not only back in the biblical days, but in our days as well. Be the 2 and not the 10. I pray this teaching has been edifying. Let's lift up the name of the Holy One. With love, in Echad. Shalom.